Tonight, scroll through your phone for long enough and you will find someone talking about the loneliness epidemic. Researchers say it is at crisis levels. Governments are appointing ministers to handle it. Entire industries have been built around fixing it. And yet, no matter how many apps and therapists and social media platforms we throw at the problem, more people report feeling profoundly alone than at any other point in recorded history. So here's the question nobody seems to be asking. What did humans do before any of that existed? Not just before smartphones, before cities, before religion as we know it. Before language was even fully formed, how did our ancestors, the ones who built everything that came after, handle the weight of being alone in the world? The answer is not what you would expect, and it changes everything about how we think about loneliness today. Let us start with something most people get wrong about early humans. We tend to imagine them as solitary figures, wandering the landscape, surviving on instinct alone. But the archaeological and anthropological record tells a completely different story. Early Homo sapiens were not loners by nature. They were from the very beginning among the most intensely social creatures that ever walked the earth. Bands of hunter-gatherers typically consisted of 20 to 50 individuals. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone depended on everyone. To be separated from the group was not a philosophical state. It was a death sentence. Predators hunted the edges. Food required coordination. Survival was a collective project, and it had been that way for hundreds of thousands of years before anyone thought to write it down. This is where loneliness gets interesting. Because if early humans lived in such tight-knit groups, why did loneliness exist at all? The neuroscientist John Cacioppo spent decades studying loneliness and concluded that it is not a flaw in human design. It is a feature. Loneliness is a biological alarm system, the same way hunger signals that your body needs food, or pain signals that something is damaging your tissue. When you feel lonely, your brain is telling you that you have drifted too far from the group. It is an ancient warning, older than civilization, older than language, and in the ancient world, that warning was taken seriously in ways we have completely forgotten. So what did they actually do about it? The first and most powerful tool ancient humans had against loneliness was not conversation, it was touch. Before words, before firelit stories, there was physical contact, and the archaeological record gives us glimpses of just how central it was. Grooming, the kind you still see in chimpanzees and bonobos, was not just about hygiene, it was the original social glue. The primatologist Robin Dunbar, famous for his work on group sizes and social bonding, has argued that as human groups grew too large for grooming alone to hold them together, language evolved partly to fill that gap. Gossip, in Dunbar's framing, was social grooming at scale. You could bond with multiple people at once simply by talking about shared concerns, shared people, and shared experiences. Early humans did not just talk to communicate, they talked to stay connected. Every conversation was a form of touch at a distance. But there was something else happening alongside the talking, something even older and harder to replicate in the modern world: rhythm. Ancient humans used music, or the precursor to music, in ways that modern science is only beginning to understand. Drums made from bone and hide, flutes carved from vulture wings, with the oldest known example dating back roughly 40,000 years, found in the Swabian Alps of Germany. When a group of people move together in rhythm, whether dancing or drumming or chanting, their bodies synchronize in measurable ways. Heart rates align, breathing patterns converge. The brain releases endorphins, the same chemicals triggered by laughter and exercise. Researchers who have studied collective music making have found that it produces a sense of bonding that is almost impossible to replicate through conversation alone. You did not need to know someone's name to feel connected to them. You just needed to move with them in time. This matters because it tells us something important about what loneliness actually is. It is not simply the absence of other people. You can be in a crowded room and feel completely alone. What loneliness is actually missing is the sense of attunement, the feeling that you are seen and that you are in sync with those around you. Ancient humans built entire ritual systems around manufacturing that feeling. The anthropologist Victor Turner called these experiences communitas, moments of intense collective identity where social hierarchies temporarily dissolve and individuals feel fused into something larger than themselves. Every tribal dance, every communal hunt, every firelit ceremony was, in part, a technology for fighting loneliness at scale. Now here is the part that should make modern people deeply uncomfortable. Ancient humans did not treat loneliness as a personal failure. They did not look at someone who was struggling and conclude that the individual was the problem. Loneliness was understood as a signal from the environment, not a character flaw. If someone in the band was withdrawing, the group responded. Elders intervened. Rituals were performed. The community adjusted. There was no such thing as quietly suffering alone because there was no privacy in the way we understand it. You slept together. You ate together. You moved through the world in a formation that made isolation almost physically impossible. The burden of connection was shared by everyone, not just a person who happened to be feeling alone. This communal responsibility had a practical architecture behind it. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, societies that still live something close to the original human arrangement, have observed a consistent pattern. When someone is grieving, when someone is ill, when someone seems to be disappearing into themselves, the group does not wait for that person to ask for help. They simply arrive. They sit with the person, they bring food, they make themselves physically present until the weight lifts. There is no appointment to schedule, no waiting list, and no assessment of whether the suffering qualifies for intervention. The intervention is automatic because the group understands at a level that is almost instinctive that one person's disconnection is a threat to everyone. Compare that to what happens now. The modern solution to loneliness is largely therapeutic and individual. We treat it as a problem inside the lonely person, something to be diagnosed, medicated, or worked through in private sessions. We have almost completely abandoned the model of communal response. And it is worth asking whether that abandonment is part of why loneliness has become so catastrophic. We did not just change how we live, we changed who is responsible for the pain of living, and we handed that responsibility entirely to the individual. The science of loneliness adds another layer to what ancient humans seem to understand by instinct. Just as our bodies retain the ancient programming for segmented sleep, our nervous systems retain the ancient programming for communal belonging. Research by Julianne Holt-Lundstad, a psychologist who has spent years studying the health effects of social isolation, has found that chronic loneliness is as damaging to the human body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It raises cortisol levels, suppresses immune function, accelerates cognitive decline, and shortens life expectancy. Your body is not being dramatic when it feels lonely. It is running an ancient survival protocol that was calibrated for a world where isolation really did mean death. The alarm is real. The threat it was designed to detect has just changed shape. And here is what ancient humans understood that we have forgotten entirely. The antidote to loneliness was never comfort. It was meaning. The ceremonies, the drumming, the collective hunts, the stories told around the fire, none of these were primarily designed to make people feel warm and fuzzy. They were designed to plug individuals into something larger than themselves, into a story about who they were and why they mattered, and what they were part of. The lonely person in an ancient band was not given a self-help scroll or advised to practice self-care. They were handed a role. They were given something to do that the group needed. They were reminded through action rather than words that they were not optional. That reframing is significant because if loneliness is fundamentally about meaning and not just proximity, then a world full of people who are physically near each other but spiritually disconnected will produce exactly what we have. Offices full of colleagues who never really know each other. Cities full of neighbors who never speak. Social media feeds are full of faces with no depth behind them. We have solved the problem of proximity with extraordinary success, and in doing so, we have made the deeper problem almost invisible. The ancient humans who painted the walls of Lascaux 17,000 years ago were not doing it for art's sake in the modern sense. They were doing it together, in firelight and in a space that required collaboration to even reach. The paintings are a record of shared experience, a declaration that we were here together and we made something. Every piece of ancient art, every burial with grave goods, every carved figurine found in a communal site is evidence of people reaching toward each other across the enormous weight of existence and saying, "You are not alone in this." We have inherited that impulse. You feel it when a song on the radio makes you pull over because it says exactly what you could not say. You feel it when a stranger sits next to you at a funeral and says nothing but stays anyway. You feel it when you are at a crowd that suddenly for a moment moves as one. That feeling is not nostalgia. It is not a glitch. It is 300,000 years of human wiring firing exactly as it was designed to, reminding you that you were never meant to do this alone. The ancient answer to loneliness was not an app or a pill or a hotline. It was a fire, a circle of people, a rhythm that everyone could feel in their chest, and the unspoken agreement that no one in the circle would be allowed to disappear. We traded that circle for convenience, for privacy, and for the extraordinary freedom of the modern world. And most of us never even knew it was gone.